Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So, oh boy, I'll spare you the long story. The short story, over the last 10 years, I've done three things. I've been helping set up and run big businesses. I'm the guy who built and ran the IBM Automation Business Division. Following that, you may have heard we did a little acquisition called Red Hat. So I had to do the post-integration and took on the cloud application structure there. From there, it got really interesting. From there, I started working with a group of private equity investors and activists around reinventing the large SIs. And in that reinvention came along the advanced technology thread. And to that end, actually most recently, a couple of months in, I've joined to help reinvent a company called Amelia.ai, which you just heard about from Zvi, as the Chief Growth Officer and Operating Partner.
So 2 months in, have you fixed everything?
We have eyeballs on stuff. We have not fixed everything. It's such an important space right now.
Fair enough.
And I'll say that from two lenses. One, from a financial or economic lens, the activity and the volume of attention going towards applied AI and conversational AI in general is through the roof. And all spawned by what I'll call, what's the phrase? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Interesting phrase I heard earlier, the BCAC, before COVID, after COVID thing.
Yeah.
It seems to be the pivot point for many of us, if not all of us. The things that spun from the after COVID event around workforce isolation, around another interesting phrase, we hear about UX, CX, UI. I actually think those are actually subchapters of what I'll call human experience, HX. So all these things have really fueled this driver.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to kind of frame it as human experience, especially in a conversation around AI. So I guess maybe to take a step back, so we heard a little bit from Zvi about how MSKCC is using Amelia, but what attracted you to Amelia in the first place? Why, and maybe not at an attraction level so much as the company, what brought you to the company? What was the kind of driver?
Two main things: front runner in the technology and the innovation part of the development, and an opportunity set to bridge together to marry that innovation to the applied aspects of the technology. I've watched over the last, let's call it 5, 6, 7 years, really cool technology emerge with no home. I think most of you, if not all of you, agree, we had this wicked thing called blockchain arrive. What do we do with that?
Still figuring it out. Not quite sure.
So these, it's one example of many that, these things arrive, they're a hammer looking for a nail. You got to change that, right? We got to start looking at different paths, different solutions, different offering sets, so that adoption really, really ramps.
So, but I guess if I think about that human experience, right? I think all of us have had some level of experience. You call up and the thing says, hi, I can help you. Tell me what you want to do. And then you yell at the thing until eventually you say, just give me an agent, please. I want that human experience. Now, to your point, I think during COVID, you saw an increase in the rise of calls. You saw people that were, not able to be in front of their machine because of whatever the remote work thing that was going on, or quarantine, or pandemic. And so, result is there was kind of this mismatch between, supply and demand, right? So, how do you avoid that, frankly, just terrible experience that you typically get from what I'll call most chatbots and technologies like that?
Yep. So I will give you sort of one step further than the concepts. Conversational AI is interesting. I originally, let's call it 2 years ago, thought it was a rebranding of chatbots.
Basically IVR, right?
Sort of, hey, here's the next step of this. You can talk to something,
Sure.
Which was not untrue at the time. The concept I want to throw on the table for everyone here is think about a digital resource unit now. Many of us have probably gone through outsourcing deals. So you have, the ARCs and Rooks, and you have billable resource units, which are human butts in chairs. Now you have a digital resource unit, a software-based unit, and the concept goes from, I have a thing that can conduct a autonomous task. Oh, wow, we got really smart and got RPAs in there, and now those tasks become activities. But now we have a digital role. That digital role or resource unit has fundamentally changed the game. Now, where does that change come in? It's no longer a tool, okay, Anthony? That resource unit is aligned with the adoption path and how we work with the technology. Think about this. We're what, 15, 16 years into iPhone and Siri? How many people loved Siri when it came out? You'd yell at it, to your point. What the heck is this? It's cool, but I'm never going to buy an iPhone based on Siri. Now, almost everybody in this room will walk into their vehicle and talk to the car because you want to change the radio station. Everybody will change the temperature in their house based on the Nest thing, right? But you're talking to the technology as opposed to treating it as a widget that's heavy in your backpack. It's now part of that adoption of that human experience.
But I think my problem with those technologies are still fairly limited in interaction, right? So
Yep.
I think what was kind of an eye-opener for me, when I really started using it was when I realized I could program it to do things that I needed it to do,
Sure.
right? And so that brings me a little bit to what my experience has been with most, chatbot technologies and conversational AI platforms. There's just a long tail and a lot of money involved in implementing these things. So how are you guys addressing that? Is that same case with Amelia?
I think it's the case around the horn, right? You're right. There's the adoption path is at its pivot point right now. So the context, the semantics, the environmental awareness has gotten entirely better. I'll steal a good friend's marketing line, Bill McDermott over at ServiceNow. He's workflowing everything, right? Let me tell you the intelligence behind this one. Let me define workflow, and this will answer your question. To me, it's not just a double click in the process. A workflow to me is a rebalancing of what a human being is doing, what your business systems are doing, and now what algorithms are doing, right? If you treat it as a tool set and just jam it in your backpack, you're a hammer looking for a nail, it doesn't get into that workflow. But once you start designing a resource unit that one click beyond activities and tasks, man, it's a game changer. It really is, because it's no longer, and coming full circle, it's not just the remarketing of a chatbot. That's the front end of it. That systems of engagement, getting better,
It's the
avatar looks better.
platform.
Now the platform, think about the back end of this, and I'm trying to build a business, but
You're
I'm
gonna
like
give a
myself or
technical
everyone else.
architecture presentation? Is that
Well,
the-
so here's the interesting part. Being part of the activist and PE world, have everyone heard of a little company called Celonis?
Sure.
Okay, 300 million bucks, worth 13 billion enterprise value now. Why? Because it digitally renders the workflow design, and it even goes beyond the digital aspect, analog as well. So now marry your conversational AI with a process and data mining engine where you're reinventing the process and workflow as you go. So I live in New York, just north of here. I used a little app called Waze to get here. Looking across the demographic of the room, I used to print out MapQuest. Remember MapQuest? Holy crap. Oh yeah, it's 2 routes for you, and that's it. That's called static workflow. Now we have dynamic workflow. It's crowdsourced, it's intelligent, it's environmental, it's situationally aware. Now apply that principle to your accounting department. Now, in terms of accruals, now apply that principle to healthcare from the last group. Holy cow, that changes the game quite a bit. You are no longer in a static world. That is what conversational AI is sparking forward. So that ecosystem, is it expensive? Does it require heavy lifting? You bet you know what it does. But once you get through that first hurdle, it fundamentally changes how you look at a digital business.
Well, and I imagine that there's an ROI associated with it that can be strong, but I think there's a lot of challenge that I see organizations have to take on. And kudos to MSKCC and to HSS,
Sure.
to organizations that are not necessarily looking at it as much from a financial component, right? To Svi's point, I think a lot of the banks have implemented various different versions of conversational AI over the years, and it's always because they wanted to reduce cost, and it does, right?
Sure.
But if I look at the patient experience and I look at the outcomes associated with getting someone the right level of care at the right time from a technology perspective, there's more impact that can be made, and I think that's where things like Amelia can be really interesting.
Absolutely. I'm going to kind of open the kimono all the way. Here are the 2 things we struggle with every single day, twice on Sunday. How do you economically model behavior and loyalty?
Yeah.
If anyone has an answer, pull me aside, because we're trying to figure out from an investor relations standpoint, how do you do that? Yes, cost baselines, cost of operations, return on sales, all that stuff, got it. But how do I measure behavior and loyalty in that.
Or even brand experience, or to your point, human
Yeah.
experience, right? And that's what kind of contributes to it.
Sure.
And I like the kind of way you frame it around, workflow, because the problem with RPA and most automation technologies that I've seen is it's brittle, it's designed for a moment in time, and it's not really, it's the intended workflow, but like, how many times during a conversation do you pivot, do something else, and nobody follows the actual workflow. So,
Right.
I always think of that video of like the woman who shows like the little, here's the design, and the person has the blocks that are the shapes that go in the box, and like the guy goes, oh, it's a circle, and he puts it in the circle, and then he takes the rectangle and puts it in the circle, and then he takes the triangle and puts it in the circle. Like there's all this disconnect, and that's just the way that users interact with it. So that dynamism is really important.
Absolutely. So look, let's think about the most fundamental. Everyone's in the CIO CTO realm here, right? We heard from Svi. He has jokingly 2 of every enterprise system. And arguably, I bet you most of those duplicates on his Noah's Ark has, at minimum, a dual authentication path. How do you get an RPA to work on multiple ERP systems, each with a dual authentication, and then each with changing data sets over time? That's why RPAs were originally
And
valued
you're saying
like this.
Amelia can do that?
No, I'm saying Amelia,
Just wanna make
Amelia in the ecosystem recognizes
Sure.
the
The
different
shortcomings of
pathways,
those,
and what it does is
That makes sense.
introduces to you the dynamicism of that process.
That makes sense.
It's not a panacea solution. What it does is it recognizes the dynamic versus static process.
Awesome. Well, Gene, I've really enjoyed the chat. We're out of time, but appreciate you taking some time.
No, thanks
everyone.
folks. All right.